Hi, everybody. So, we will be talking about the impact of gynecological cancers on young adults, a journey that is similar to the experience that many other people have, but it has some very distinct differences. As we all know, a diagnosis of cancer often comes as a shock, and it is something that complicates the life of the person who's been diagnosed from the beginning. What our goal for today is to acknowledge that the young adult child journey with cancer is different than that of older people and also different than that of younger people. There are very unique needs that are faced by those who are in many ways at a stage in life when they're building their lives. So I'm gonna present some of the questions and issues that young adults diagnosed with cancer might think about, and hopefully that will also be help to their providers as they think about services for this population. In some ways, the goal of this presentation is really to just enhance the recognition of some of the obstacles and emotions that younger adult cancer patients face on their journey. So, some of the unique challenges that are different than encountered by older women really deal with issues of fertility, body image, relationships, career, and even long term health. You think about it, when you're diagnosed at a younger age, you will live for a longer period of time, either having had cancer or on the cancer journey. Sometimes you face the burden in an illness like a GYN or an ovarian cancer, where you may be the youngest person in the center that you're being treated at, in the clinics that you attend, on the protocol that you are on. And we heard from Sulika Girard last year when she was talking about like the burden of being really the youngest person in the room. And even though that may not sound as complicated as it can be, if you think about being 22 and being in a location where everybody is in their 50s, their 60s, their 70s, their 80s, sometimes just the feeling that you don't fit there, in addition to the feeling of having just been diagnosed with cancer, can really leave somebody feeling a little bit uneasy. So young adults are really at a critical stage in life, right? Where they're establishing their independence, they are pursuing or creating their careers, they are forming relationships and planning for the future. And if you also think about, we'll talk about dating a little bit, but also thinking about dating after a diagnosis of cancer. And I think that GYN cancers add another layer of complication to the cancer story. So ovarian cancer kind of disrupts some of these normal developmental processes, and it really leads to some significant emotional and social challenges that can persist, after treatment ends. So addressing these aspects is really essential to providing and improving overall outcomes for patients, promoting mental health, and ensuring a better quality of life during and after cancer. So, in wanting to identify some of the unique psychosocial challenges, you think about, again, emotional distress, relationship strains, social isolation, and identity issues. If everybody would think back to your younger, young adult years, right? You think about how important that time was to have one's freedom to be able to explore maybe many different relationships and many different job possibilities. And those things can all be a little bit limited if you've been diagnosed and then are facing treatment for GYN cancers. So when you think about this unique journey, it's helpful to think about the fact that um, as people of all ages enter the medical arena, having been diagnosed with ovarian cancer, there are ways that people really can help each other. And it is interesting to think about how the cohort of women diagnosed with ovarian and GYN cancers really become some of the main people helping each other. I just want to share a moment because yesterday I had the privilege of running a book club for women with GYN cancers, along with the other staff at OCRA, and the warmth, the strength, the compassion, the friendship among the 54 women who joined this group was just so remarkable. And in some ways, the intensity and the connections feel stronger than you feel in many different locations where friends convene. So it's just really important to hold on to the fact that even though there are so many things that happen that you don't want to happen on the cancer journey, you don't want to be part of this club. But once you are there, it is pretty remarkable to understand who some of the other members on this road with you are, and not just how hopeful and helpful they can be, but also kind of the love and the friendship that is so unique, found among a group of women who understand each other. It's interesting to think about, is it really different depending on the age that you're diagnosed? And sometimes I think one of the things we're concerned with is that everybody is treated the same way. There's kind of a cookie cutter sense that if you have a diagnosis of a certain kind of cancer, regardless of your age, everybody is the same, everybody reacts the same way. And it is that difference that we're trying to present here. But there is something to think about when we talk about young adulthood, right? You think about realizing that young adulthood is not just one thing, right? It's not just here's the story and this is the story. There's different stages to young adulthood. And if you again let yourself think back to who you were in your 20s, who you are in your 30s, who you might be in your 40s, that it is really, those are distinctly different times in life, and times where there are different milestones that you are achieving and that you're looking towards. So if you think about being in the younger stage of young adulthood, um, if you're transitioning to adulthood and you're diagnosed with cancer, like it seems like those two stages in life are very incongruous with each other. If you're somebody who's just become independent, you're living on your own, you're paying your bills for the first time, you're starting out with new relationships, a new job, being diagnosed with cancer is also kind of incongruous to that experience in life. So another thing to think about when you think about like what you remember in life. There's a lot of interesting literature on the fact that we remember more things at times of transition, and that again, when you are first diagnosed with cancer, it is absolutely a time of transition. So those things that happen in those first weeks are going to be things that really are prevailing memories throughout the rest of your life. And you'll hear people talk about, they'll be able to tell you the date they were diagnosed, things that happened in those first couple of weeks. So it's interesting to think about kind of the impact of the diagnosis, and also the difference in the stages of who you are, whether you're 20, whether you're 30, whether you're 40. At the beginning, right, there is a sense that for young adults with cancer, the shock may be more profound because it is more unexpected, right? In some ways, we live in a world where the older you get, the more likely it seems that you could be diagnosed with cancer. So when you think about how you feel at the beginning, you want to not be part of this group, right? And you're also, so you're kind of shocked about it, and you're also somewhat denying of it. And it makes it difficult to hear all the information and all the things you need to know, because in fact you're in a different emotional state than you usually are when you're learning information. And there's fear and anxiety that prevail at the beginning and then sometimes during the course, because you worry about not just about today, but you worry about what the treatment's going to be like, and the uncertainty of the treatment outcome. I think everybody would like to be assured at the very beginning that the course will be as planned, as predicted, and there'll be a certain time when treatment ends. And we all know that sometimes there are bumps in the road, but it's also true that there's a degree of worry, right, that sets in sometimes when you're diagnosed. And I think that all of those feelings, plus what is happening medically and the time that it takes to go through treatment, to deal with treatment, takes a toll, right? And it has an impact on all the things you were doing. So whatever life plans or education or careers or thoughts of starting a family that were there can all be impacted by the diagnosis. So suddenly you're in shock, you're not expecting this, and then you have to negotiate and balance all the other components of your life while you at the same time have to manage the diagnosis and its treatment. So it can be very overwhelming. And then there's a lot of information and treatment options that come at you right away. And then, depending again on what stage in young adulthood you're at, it can be very difficult to understand the medical technician technology. And, we always talk about people moving forward with an informed consent. That would imply that you understand everything that's going on and what you have to learn. You have to learn quickly in order to make those decisions. And again, as you're towards the younger age of young adulthood, it may well be that in the past you've had parents or other caregivers who've been there for you in making these kind of decisions, or maybe you've never had to make any decision like this. So now the thought about partnership with the other adults around you, with other people you are in relationships with in your family, become a new thing that you have to negotiate, and communication about that is also a thing that you have to learn. So you're learning information, you're learning about the illness and the treatment, you're negotiating everything else that's going on in your life, and you're trying to maintain your independence. And I think those things again can be overwhelming. So you think about also like this doesn't just happen and then tomorrow you wake up and you feel fine emotionally. There is a degree of stress associated with this, and there certainly are feelings of sadness, irritability, frustration, which also make it hard for you to connect sometimes with the people that you love, because you are in understandably a different mood, in a different place emotionally. And there is a kind of vulnerability, right? Depending on if you're somebody who's very independent and suddenly you feel very teary and like you need other people for help, but you don't want to ask for help. There's also a sense, right, that you don't feel like yourself. And if you let yourself think about that, like the times in your life where you have not felt like yourself and you felt a little bit out of control emotionally, how you then manage to navigate all the things around you while you're kind of trying to manage your own relationship with yourself. And I think that that's an important thing to think about throughout this journey. You're trying to connect to who you are, your inner soul, if you want to think about that, and how it is you deal with crises. The younger you are, the more likely this may be the first crisis like this that you have had to deal with. So there's also like a learning scale going on. And again, I'm going to just stay for a second with that feeling unlike yourself. Sometimes it's hard to do anything when you don't feel like you know who you are. Depression and anxiety, or persistent feelings of sadness, hopefulness, loss of interest in usual day-to-day activities, can be a part of the beginning. And then kind of anxiety related to treatment and side effects, and just again the disruptions in your normal routine. It's our normal routines that keep most of us going on a day-to-day basis. And you know that when you skew from that, you can feel a little bit off, you can feel a little bit different. So that adds to also that almost like feeling about whose life is this and who am I and what am I doing. And then in particular with GYN cancers, you think about some of the physical changes, and some of those are changes that come with any diagnosis or treatment plan for cancer, but some of those come with kind of how you perceive yourself, how you identify your role, both based on gender, based on your connection to relationships, and again, when you're feeling less confident, less assured of who you are, it also may make you feel like you want to limit your social interactions, which then makes you feel more isolated, which then makes you feel more depressed. So you think it's an interesting cycle to be attended to as early as possible in the cancer treatment, because the more that you isolate yourself, sometimes the more you really do it sounds funny to say, find yourself alone. But some of the goal behind all of this is to not go through this journey alone, both at the time of diagnosis, during treatment, and afterwards. There are interesting things in body image as well, right? Like your appearance really may change, and that may impact how you see yourself, right? It changes the way in which you see yourself. For people who are on treatments where you lose your hair, that's one of the biggest ways, right? That people talk about how different they feel. And some people become comfortable in that situation, and some people don't ever find themselves comfortable. But then there's also an emotional connection to that, right? Like there's a change in how you feel about your appearance, combined with a change in how you're feeling physically. So again, it goes back to if you're not feeling like yourself, like those questions of who are you now? What is this? What is the story that is unfolding? And many of the feelings are just very natural and normal feelings consistent with the situation that you find yourself in. But the interesting question is, who do you talk about this to? Who wants to talk to you about it? Who's interested in talking to you about it? We'll talk a little bit more about friendship, but like who stays on this journey with you, and who wants to be a partner in it, and who do you connect to on your medical team? When all of a sudden you have things to talk about that maybe yesterday were not on your mind, but they're there now, and who's available to you. The feelings of a loss of control and potentially a loss of independence, right, is something that is again hard to deal with at the beginning, and people may find that it's easier as you go along this journey. You get into a routine, you adapt to who's there, you make connections with healthcare providers. So, on the one hand, the goal is to maintain your independence, your making of decisions while dealing with kind of these disruptions and potentially the loss of your more recently gained autonomy. And then here you find yourself having to make decisions, and sometimes they are very big decisions. Um, when you haven't maybe yet figured out who you make decisions in life with or how you make decisions, but also, if you have had that newly found sense of independence, when you feel like you then have to depend on people, you need to talk to other people about things or make decisions with other people, it may feel like kind of an emotional regression, maybe even a sense of failure, right? That you need to go back to being helped by other people. So it's interesting to think as a culture how we help ourselves understand that involving other people in decision making, communicating with other people, asking for help are all signs of strength, not signs of regression, not signs of failure, regardless of if you're in your 20s, your 30s, your 40s, that it helps at times to have somebody else there to listen to information, to be part of this journey with you. Now, one of the things that comes with ovarian cancer, with all cancers and treatments, is really a sense of exhaustion, right? And both physically and emotionally. So, fatigue is one of the pieces of the cancer journey that we probably don't talk about enough. Because if you think about it, when you are really exhausted, it is really hard for you to engage in activities of the world. So we kind of think pretty consistently about cancer treatment and maybe feeling nauseous, feeling sick, but feeling weak and feeling tired are other features of this. And feeling tired is also something that connects to your mental health and your ability to cope with things. Everybody knows, right? When you're feeling really tired, it's not like the best time to make decisions, to talk to other people. So sometimes it is difficult to engage in social activities when you're feeling exhausted because all you want to do is sleep or lie on the couch. Sometimes the fatigue can feel unrelenting, right? And so it really can create physical and emotional distress. Fatigue can also be confusing, right? Because it could be because of the treatment that you're going through and its impact on your body, because of the disease, because of the stress that you're feeling with. But sometimes you might think fatigue is itself an indicator of a new problem or something else. So it really becomes kind of a complicated feature on the illness journey. It's almost like you wish you could take this concept of fatigue, put it on the couch next to you, and let it leave you alone so that you can be who you were beforehand. So, added to some of the things you are feeling at the beginning of the cancer journey, is really like this sense or this fear of the cancer returning, even after it has been treated, after you have no evidence of disease. And sometimes that fear also creates a little bit of difficulty, like in moving forward and planning for the future. So uncertainty is also one of the features of living with a GYN cancer and ovarian cancer, at the beginning and even throughout the course of treatment. So when you think about like advancing your own life, advancing your career, taking steps, taking risks, if you're living with that uncertainty, the uncertainty becomes another emotional thing to carry with you. So sometimes worry and uncertainty partner with each other, and it becomes important to think about how you deal with those feelings of uncertainty and still allow yourself to move forward in life and to create the best life in the, again, I think somewhere I say this, either in spite of or because of cancer. Sometimes people feel as though they actually are freed up by the cancer diagnosis to be able to take other risks and to make other decisions because, again, you realize that you're overcoming something you never expected that you would overcome. And you find parts of yourself in the same way that you may not recognize who you are. You also find a kind of inner strength and parts of yourself that you may not have met before. So you think about how you kind of reintegrate into normal life and routines. And sometimes you really need help adjusting to that ability to reintegrate into things. And then there are thinking about how you adjust to certain side effects or physical changes, because some of those things can become arduous. So there's the diagnosis itself, but then there's the impact of treatment. And I think that some of the challenges that you face to adjustment really are impacted by development and what you have experienced in life, what you've coped with, what your strengths are, and thinking about like the concept of becoming who you are at the beginning when you are developing. And I think that your 20s can be a particularly vulnerable time, right? They're supposed to be like a time of growth and living out your dreams. And again, maybe taking more risks, doing more fun things, having more adventures. And when that adventure is GYN cancer, it takes on a different role and it impedes some of that normal development and some of the time for capacity and skill building. And so then I think one of the challenges is how you enable yourself to still grow and to begin moving into some of those dimensions of who you are, even while you're going through cancer treatment. And who do you find to connect to on that journey and to allow you to continue to grow, like emotionally and in many ways to meet some of the developmental milestones that you would be meeting before the cancer diagnosis. You'll hear a lot about post-traumatic stress. There are really times when reactions to treatment can really have a post-traumatic stress reaction. And I think that there's some of the physical symptoms, things related to flashbacks of the actual medical experience or some of the more traumatic moments of the experience. I think that sometimes if you're having or you have a post-traumatic stress disorder in response to your illness, it may make it hard for you to go back to the medical center or go back to some of the places where you have those traumatic associations. But there is also another component to this as it relates to post-traumatic stress, which is that this is the cancer experience, the treatment is not one period in time or one set of things. There is an ongoing nature. And for some people, this experience may look and feel more like a chronic illness with things that you have to manage consistently over time so that you're constantly exposed to those stressors. So getting help to deal with this disorder and with some of these feelings to enable you to continue to be on this journey is really, really important. Because again, it is not a journey with an end. The way some things which create post-traumatic stress disorders for people are. You're not going to be able to be out of the situation of this experience. It's also important to think about kind of like the existential nature of things that happen and in your life, and particularly when you're thinking about the some of the GYN cancers, right? There is a way that the life that you knew before is a little bit challenged, and how you kind of find the grounding and the peace of mind to again go back and recognize yourself, to become the person you want to be, to use this experience to enable you to connect to some components of yourself that you might not have connected to until much older ages. So I think that the concept of seeking meaning and understanding from the cancer experience is a really important one. And then thinking about, if you have not found within the context of your own immediate network people who understand somewhat the existential component of what the cancer journey does, how do you find those people? And I think the answer to a lot of coping and a lot of things in young adulthood are very consistent with what people in young adulthood need, right? Like you think about the hobbies people have, the people they connect to around those, the sports teams that people, you know, join, or the leagues that people join, the activities, the socializing, the ways in which you create certain kind of trips and adventures in young adulthood. How do you create those things on the cancer journey so that you really can continue to have life experiences that are consistent with your age and what you should be experiencing in life? I think the important message, right, is that you are not alone in this. And I think that particularly with organizations like OCRA and the extensive support program and all of the advocacy efforts and the information gathering, there are cohorts of people in this with you. Some you haven't met yet, and some who you are already connected to. And then there are the people in your life who really step up and are there with you. And I think it's important to carry that message that this cancer journey does not have to be one of isolation and one that you experience by yourself. When you think about the Staying Connected series through OCRA, I think that born of the pandemic, this is a program that has grown to touch the lives of so many women facing um, all different types of GYN and ovarian cancers at all different stages. And there are weekly and monthly programs that really offer invaluable connections and support. I just want you to show you this snapshot of some of what exists in the course of a week. You know, that there are many different programs running every day, and you can go to the OCRA website and you'll see a much more extensive picture of what is there. But you can really meet people in these programs who are at very similar stages to where you are at, to different periods in on the treatment journey. And I think that it's interesting to think about too that this is a very diverse program, so that there'll be some things that will be an interesting innovation in a particular season or a particular time during the year, and then there are other regular programs that happen weekly or monthly. And I think that the consistency of such programming is also another way to begin to create a routine that works for you. So when you think about coping and what you need and the kinds of emotional support you need, I think that we want to really suggest that having professional psychosocial support is a really important thing during this journey, not because there is something wrong with anybody who's a young adult who's diagnosed with GYN or ovarian cancer, but because this is not an easy journey. And you are usually, at the time of diagnosis, brand new to this journey. Of course, it is a little bit different if you are in a family where you've had a grandmother or a mother or a sister who's also shared this diagnosis. And so you may have a lived experience um, of living with ovarian cancer, living with GYN cancers, but you may not completely understand that when it is your journey, it is a different journey, right? There's just different things that you experience. So it is different as a daughter of somebody with ovarian cancer versus as a sister, as a spouse. So it is helpful to have professionals often who have been through this journey with other people and who have developed the expertise in how to support people, how to understand people, how to find referrals and resources for people. And I think that there are also certain kind of targeted techniques along the way, such as CBT and other interventions that will help you be able to keep kind of like, again, the positive avenues of this experience or of your life or of other things that you're doing, and to allow you to learn how to kind of partialize some of the pieces of the cancer experience. And some of those skills, which become skills that maybe you learn during cancer treatment, help you with other things that you will encounter elsewhere in life. There's also the idea of mentorship, right? Having somebody who's been there before you, has again the lived experience, and can be available to talk to you about going through this experience, about the support they have provided, the support that they have gained, and just thinking about like the road in cancer is not one that is linear. And you think about at moments in time you are vulnerable because you're diagnosed, because you learn that you've recurred and you need to explore a new treatment option. But at other points during this journey, you gain so much knowledge that the ability to be a mentor, to be able to offer your wisdom to other people, becomes something that, in fact, also enables you to cope, right? That your helping of somebody else can be as much a tool in your emotional armor as it is for the person who you are helping. So it is interesting again to connect with other young adults or to connect with older women who were young adults when they in fact were diagnosed, that they have been there. They may not be the age you are now at as a young adult, but they were. And they have very strong memories of what helped them during that time and what that meant. And sometimes the connections you will make with other people will be the things that enable you to get through this journey in a productive emotional way. So there would be that recommendation to think about all the online services, the virtual services, and where you are living, there may well be also in-person services that really can help you understand coping strategies and also help you mitigate against the isolation that you can feel. That sense of connection is a powerful, powerful um, coping device, right? In some ways, we don't always know how much we need that emotional connection until we find ourselves feeling like we are very alone. Also, mindfulness and relaxation techniques are also a really helpful way to reduce stress and anxiety for everybody, and a way that also you can connect to people of similar ages in the outside world. Everybody may not use mindfulness and relaxation for the same reason, but just the ability to connect around those resources can be very helpful. It's interesting to think about um, family and friends for support and the kind of emotional and practical support that really help you in your coping and recovery. So it's interesting to also think about open communication and expressing what you need and what you're feeling. We don't always know how to ask for what we need. And again, the younger you are in the cancer space, the less experienced you may be in asking for help. It's also just interesting to think that like the range of feelings that you experience when you're living with cancer is really vast, and you really need help from people around you to be accepting of the range of things you feel and to be willing to hear and to listen to what you say about what you're feeling. Because again, for many people, particularly young adults, these feelings may be new. This may be a new experience. There may not be other illnesses that you have had to deal with. In thinking about kind of some of the creative ways and the expressive ways that you can learn to find joy and to cope with things, I want to do a shout out to the expressive arts and book club activities from within the OCRA program. We really, really, again, I think about what words come to me, and the words, being somebody who has, again, the honor of being part of those programs, is the strength, the compassion, the friendship, the joy that people find and experience. And I think that in some ways, sometimes when you're diagnosed with cancer, people treat you like you've been diagnosed with cancer or that you have um, some crazy illness, and they don't necessarily include you in some of the regular activities that you might have been included in before. And one of the things that we have learned in these groups is just how important it is to be in a book club, to do something that is grounded in the present, is grounded in something you've just read, to be reminded of what a great diversion, comfort reading is, right? And how nice it is to talk to people who maybe think like you and share some of the experience you've had, but that what your communication is about, whether it's about a book, whether it is about a creative activity, whether it is because everybody is learning something new together, or because the experience is not easy because it pushes your creativity and your capacity to another direction, but enabling people to have such an opportunity, and even um, to get supplies in the mail, to have a package that comes to you for these programs is also, like, not everybody thinks about it, but it is nice to have fun. It is nice to have something that feels like a gift coming to your door, and again, to just allow yourself to explore new things maybe you've done in the past, and to think about not letting cancer be the thing that determines who you are, but letting you be the person who determines who you are, and what you need for support and what you find fun with. So this is my shout out to saying, whether it is through OCRA or some other program, but to allow yourself to engage in new activities and to see cancer as the thing that sometimes propels you to new places, and that those new places don't all have to be stressful. So you think about just the impact on personal relationships. And I think this is, again, something to think about, that like family dynamics may shift, and then how people communicate with each other can sometimes lead to tension, but it also can lead to the strengthening of bonds, right? Like that, the fact is that when you can feel with people like you're in this together, then that feeling of being in this together and helping each other and communicating with each other can really lead to amazingly strong and powerful relationships, again, particularly at ages where you might have been more focused on yourself and your journey. Maybe this brings you back to like a place of connection. I think there are challenges in romantic relationships, both due to stress, to changes in intimacy, and to fertility concerns. Fertility concerns in this age group are really among the most dominant concerns. And I think that when you think about dating, people always talk about kind of like dating after cancer, and how do you even begin that conversation? I've been hearing from people that sometimes they have found their most supportive relationships in dating connected to other people who are facing the same or other illnesses, because sometimes the most compassionate people are people who, again, have shared a lived experience. The concept of friendship is really also one of the bigger social issues in, again, particularly this younger adult um, experience. Now, why do I say that? Because for sometimes older people who have been connected to one person over time in a relationship, who are married, who have different kinds of supports and long-term relationships, that's one set of friends or one set of people. But then you think about all the other friends in your life and which of those relationships are based on certain activities, certain things that you do together. Say you had somebody that you used to go out drinking with. Well, you might not be going out drinking when you're on chemotherapy, or you might not have the energy, or maybe you used to have late night conversations with people and now you really don't have the energy to do that. So, one of the things that happens during this experience is that certain friendships change, right? Like sometimes you come into it and you think that there's certain people who are going to be there for you. And then it may happen that those are not the people who are there for you. So some people step forward and really the relationships get stronger and the commitment to the connection gets stronger and they're there for you. They've got you. They are part of this with you. And then there's the disappointments for the people who are not there and who and maybe it's subtle in how they're not there and it becomes a change that happens over time. But there's the other part of this story, which is the people who step in and who are available to you and who are connected and who are beyond helpful. Some of those people in your life who you never paid attention to before, but suddenly it becomes clear that they have a capacity that you didn't know that they have, that you didn't recognize before. And then there are the strangers, the people who you're meeting on this cancer journey who suddenly become very important to you, very connected, and you create relationships that last forever. So the friendship thing is a little bit complicated because there's pluses, there's minuses, there's the good things that happen, the negative things that happen. But in all of that, it's also important to recognize that it's not only friends who are reacting and who can or cannot cope with the situation. You are also changing, and who you are and your capacity and what your priorities are also changing. And sometimes things like this do not become apparent until older in life, right? Like if you say you're somebody who gets married in your 20s or your 30s and you're looking back at 60 or 70 at the people who are at your wedding, you'll see that, right? Like that the list changes, that who's there. There's a natural way in which friendships change over time. But once you've been diagnosed with cancer, all the things that you perceive about friendship are through that cancer lens, right? So sometimes you think everything that changes because of your cancer story, as opposed to that there's also some natural things that change over time. There really are fewer people who are your lifelong companions, and that cancer just sometimes accelerates that process or makes you more aware of who's in your life and who's available to you. So it's interesting to think about how your social network changes and what that means and who you want, because you're making choices too and you're thinking differently, your priorities are different, and maybe just how you think about the world is different. Social isolation is a big part of what illness can bring, right? Both because of physical limitations and fatigue and the time and the demand of treatment. It feels like there's something in every day where you have to be figuring out financial issues or other issues. So it's interesting to think about the things that create isolation and what that means. But there are feelings of being um, different than your peers, having kind of reduced social engagement, and then sometimes even just how people, how you think about cancer, how other people think about cancer, and how people sometimes respond to you. I think that sometimes it scares people. People don't know how to react, and so what they do is they pull back. So rather than staying in the game, they exit because they don't know how to do things. You think about again some of the social impact, right? Some of the ways in which your education, your employment are challenged by this diagnosis. And again, if you are younger, you are new to your career, you may not have the financial security, you may not have the job security, you may not have the experience that would enable you to be continue to be growing, nonetheless, to hold on to the job. So that it is a particular issue. And there are organizations that can be helpful around career support and educational support. So then you think about also kind of like fertility and family planning. And I don't want in any way to minimize the concerns that arise. Some people learn they have a GYN cancer because of problems in trying to conceive. And sometimes, the fear of loss of fertility at a time in life when it is most important to you is really an issue that people need specialized attention on and the ability to talk about and work through and to think through. If you think about it, you are in one emotional place if you are somebody who is trying to have a family. And if it is in that part of your life's journey that you learn that you have cancer, it is the two thoughts are really incongruous with each other. So, you may somebody who has a life goal that you always wanted to be a mother, and there are many alternatives and ways of thinking about being a mother, and there are many ways in which there can be preservation of fertility during this process. But those again are like it's like a whole other avenue of thought and of coping and of dealing with things as you are dealing with the cancer experience and making cancer decisions. You will also be making different decisions related to fertility. So when you think about it, your life goals are different as a young adult than they are um, as an older adult. And I think that in some ways, being diagnosed at a younger age forces you to evaluate and reevaluate things in life at a much earlier age than you would otherwise do. And I think that people are forced with thinking about what is a fulfilling life and what do you want to do with your life in a way that you really might not focus on in earlier ages. So if you think about just all the different things that impact how it is that you live with cancer, how it is that people support you. And again, thinking about how in different cultures, cancer may be a different thing, right? In some cultures, cancer may be avoided. People may blame you, may um, think of all different things that you have to then manage when you are the person dealing with cancer. It's also just really interesting to think about the world in which we live, where social media and online communities, particularly for younger people dealing with cancer, are much more major components of um, both like functioning, friendship, coping. So the issues again may be very different for people in their 60s, their 70s, their 80s who may not be entrenched in social media in the way that younger people are. So on the positive side, there are resources in so many ways in which you can get help in the social media arena. And then on the other side, the potential negative things are kind of like an overexposure to information or misinformation and having to negotiate what is helpful, what is not helpful, what is truthful, what is not truthful. So it's again just interesting to think about social media and online activities are much more a part of those people who are diagnosed in young adulthood. I think that we talked a little bit about body image, and it's interesting to think about the different ways in which body image is impacted, and that your not just body image, but your actual body is impacted. And just if you struggle with things that impact your self confidence and your sense of self worth, then how do you deal with those things and allow yourself to find help in recognizing things which enable your self confidence and your self worth? So when you think about also just again how much more concerned at younger ages you are about how other people perceive you, right? And again, both in social and romantic contexts. And these things can all be exacerbated by issues you might be feeling with body image. So you think about, again, the disruption of developmental milestones, um, And I think some of those is really about like being in a building stage in your life, right? When you have something happen that impacts the time when you are building, then you have to redirect and reassess where you can go. So there is kind of a shift also, again, from feeling invincible to being a cancer patient. And I think that that can create a crisis of identity. And I think that there is this self concept that's embedded in being young and healthy, right? And I think that when something like cancer happens, it really does lead to feelings of vulnerability and a loss, so that one has to expect that there's going to be readjustment, and not that some of those feelings of saying self confidence won't come back, but that they may need help coming back. So it is, again, interesting to think about the impact on identity, on goals, on priorities, and thinking about purpose and meaning in life. And again, thinking about that as younger ages. Um, Parenthood is a big part of this journey, not just around fertility, but if you are a young adult and you're raising young children, how you share information, how you work with your children around what it is for a family member to have cancer, and when you feel like you're too tired to manage certain things with children. And again, for people for whom it feels as though certain ovarian cancers are a family affair, then how you deal with all members of your family, both in sharing information, in staying connected, in staying informed. And so, again, interesting to think about, again, what the impact is on you, and not just your identity and your own sense of self confidence, but your family's identity and your whole family's issues of being a cancer family. I think that um, the important message is that anxiety and depression can be partners in this, right? You can have issues around sleep. You can have worries about recurrence and things related to, again, that uncertainty, right? The fear of the unknown in relationships, and learning to live with uncertainty and learning to manage uncertainty as you move forward. And some of the challenges, some of the the normal life's challenges come into play here, but may be a bit more exaggerated. And I think that sometimes the skills in coping that you will learn during an early period of a cancer diagnosis really may help enable your capacity throughout the rest of the course of your life. So again, it's interesting to think about what are normal responses, like issues related to anxiety and depression. And then to think about, again, going back to, like, again, one of the major features of this illness is again a propensity to move towards isolation, to kind of get yourself to a place where you're dealing with things alone, when in fact some of the best age-related medicine really may be about making connections with other people, and moving towards a place where your network is expanding as opposed to your network getting smaller. I think we talked a little bit about post-traumatic stress, and I think that um, thinking about just the stressors of the cancer diagnosis may lead to adjustment disorders. And again, the recommendation would be to think, as you notice your own behavioral changes or feeling like you need help, to recognize that it is okay to get help, and that you may need help transitioning back to what would be either a cancer life when you're not in treatment, or also post treatment. Thinking about different kinds of things that would help. I think, again, thinking about therapies like CBT that helps you kind of focus on, moving past negative thoughts or helpful things to think about. And I think that peer support and group support are really very, very important features of this, because sharing this very traumatic experience with other people makes the experience that you're having less rare, less less lonely, less unfamiliar, and you think about some of the things that can happen in um, the natural course of connection can really alleviate some of the emotional suffering that people feel. I think that sometimes we don't talk about medication like antidepressants, but it's also just helpful to have people in your life who understand your psychological profile and who are there to help you with whatever services you need, whether it's talking therapy, whether it's medication, whether it's group support, or whether it's relaxation, to know and understand that that network is there for you. And if you don't know where it is, that you need to work with your healthcare professionals to find that. I think we've talked about fatigue as really kind of a partner in this. We haven't talked as much about pain, but there is pain and discomfort associated with treatment. And it is really important to think about physical therapy, complementary therapies to deal with pain so that pain does not become a factor that is a dominant feature in your life when it can be avoided, and to treat it like you would treat any other problem so that you can kind of alleviate pain. I think that, when you think about physical limitations or you think about sleep disturbances, they're all part of this story. And I think that it becomes important to just recognize them as, again, sometimes we think about like if somebody has a problem eating, we help people with their nutrition issues or with food supplements or with different things. And I think that when looking at physical limitations and sleep disturbances, they are all things that can, again, impact this journey at no matter what age you are, but it may be different at different ages because in the young adult group, there may be more of an expectation that you will engage in more and different physical activities, and an inability to do so may prevent you from feeling connected to your peers. Again, so when you think about um, the quality of life, that you play a role in creating the quality of life that you want to have. And some of that is by seeking help for the situations in life that cause you any degree of pain or suffering. And again, the younger you are, the less experienced you are in recognizing some of your own mental health issues, and asserting yourself and being proactive may be issues that you need to learn more about and how to advocate for yourself and how to find people who are advocating to figure out what helps you with stress. And I think that resilience is an interesting thing, that um, how you become more resilient and learning coping strategies that allow you to be resilient all involve, again, seeking social support, seeking professional support, and finding the particular parts of your own personal reaction to the cancer diagnosis, and then your own personal strengths and the meaning of this experience for you and for everybody in your life. All of these different features will allow you to begin to create a sense of resilience in how you deal with and manage life. Now, the social quality of your life is also, again, something we've talked about already, but just thinking about your social support and the social support you need. In that theory of it takes a village, when you are going through an ovarian cancer experience, you need a network around you to help you deal with all of the many pieces. And then I think that in fact, counseling around episodes, I would think about an episodes of service model, either um, individual, family, couple, group work that just helps you learn how to communicate effectively with the people in your life and how to ask for help, receive help, listen, provide support, get support. All of those things become more complicated. And again, the younger you are, the less likely you have developed those skills. Or, the people will talk about being in therapy for 20 years or this or that. Well, when you're 20, you're generally not somebody who's had that experience. So allowing yourself to get help is a really important part of this journey, and allowing yourself to participate and to use the community around you, right? Cancer does not have to be a journey that you go on alone and actually um, the women that can be with you on this journey are pretty remarkable and really able to be helpful. I think that, careers, finances are all important parts of this. And if you go to the OCRA website, um, there will be ways to learn more about some of the financial resources out there. There are actually career and education resources that would be very helpful. And you just think about as you move to this new normal, what it means and how it impacts how you balance all of the things in your life, right? And I think sometimes finding that balance is hard for everybody, but when you add cancer diagnosis and treatment to it, you have to be more creative in the balance and in understanding um, what you need. And I think that sometimes we think that survivorship is means that cancer is done and that it is no longer part of your life. But in fact, the cancer experience is often one that has an impact long beyond the actual diagnosis and treatment. And then if you're dealing with recurrences, it has an ongoing nature to it. And therefore, there is a way in which creating ongoing networks for support become increasingly more important. I think, again, that fertility and reproductive health are a very big part of this, and that becoming informed, learning all there is to learn, understanding what your options are, and then managing those things is another important piece of all this. And I think that in some ways, all of these things lead to wanting to create a life that feels very satisfying, sustainable, and where well-being is like the overall um, thing that people again are looking for. And to remember that what you do in your 20s, 30s, and 40s impacts your 50s, 60s, and 70s, and that in fact, laying the groundwork early and learning skills in coping early help you for the rest of your life. I think that there is a strain on relationships. And again, I think that when you think about caregiving and who becomes a caregiver when you need a caregiver and how you go between those roles, right? Of being the partner, of being the caregiver, of being the daughter, of being those different things, that there is a way in which you are always juggling roles, and that communication is key to all of that. So that even if you feel like you don't need support around other things, again, finding vehicles which enable communication are really, really important. And again, I think that it is true that if you think about sometimes role reversals and becoming dependent when you were independent, that these all, again, can lead to complicated feelings, and you can feel like you are starting over again and again. But I think that, again, to stress the need for help sometimes in communication and family counseling can be an effective tool. I think that I want you to keep fertility and reproductive health as an important feature in those years when people are um, aiming to have children. And I think that there really is an emotional reaction that is both very understood and very warranted, which can, in fact, one's self-esteem and future life plans, but that also finding support and help around the many different issues surrounding fertility preservation and also in alternate ways of becoming a parent are also really um, very helpful. And I think that um, I understand that for some people, this may not be the primary issue, but for many people, particularly people who learned of their cancer diagnosis when they were trying to become pregnant, that these are very, very important issues and issues that can't be minimized or taken away. And these may be, again, very different issues if you're diagnosed much older in life, when you've already had a family, when you have the supports in place for what your family was intended to be, what you wanted it to be. So I think that just again, I have this slide and some of these slides here because I want you to think about how much this may be an issue for many people that requires really a tremendous amount of help from the medical field, both around the issues of fertility, around the issues of loss of fertility, and active help in family planning, because in fact, these are the years in young adulthood that those issues are very relevant to every family, and then particularly if you've been diagnosed. I think that informed decision making is a complicated concept along the cancer journey because, particularly at the beginning, you are so overwhelmed emotionally that you're not really hearing everything that is being said or everything that's out there. And this speaks to, again, regardless of if you're 20 or 30, being able to have people with you who can learn information, hear information along with you so that you can have help in understanding what's out there because there are often time constraints and different issues at play as you're dealing with these two variables at the same time. I think that, again, when you're on the cancer journey, you should know that there's a body of oncology psychosocial professionals who are really very focused on cancer and the issues that cancer um, brings. And I think that it is important to find help to enable this to be a time of tremendous support where you may need support, where you can give support. I think that, there are also certain programs like Camp Make a Dream or First Descents that are also kind of programs that bring you as the cancer patient to outdoor activities and to certain kind of programming that are invaluable during this time. If you think about those of you who have had either camp experiences in your life or outdoor experiences, that many of these programs are designed to connect you to different parts of your life, to nature, to coping activities. And I think that we would recommend that you allow yourself to have these experiences. So again, in thinking about all things, I put TL Sisters on this list because I really cannot underscore, particularly for young adults for whom friendships and connections and building community are really a lot of how this stage and this age of development occur, that the other people who you're here at this conference with, who you come to know in different programs, are really, really important people in your own emotional survival and your growth past young adulthood. Again, I think that you can go to the OCRA website and learn more about financial counseling and supports, career and educational support. I think that when we are looking at who you are as a young adult, that we need to be thinking about you now and also kind of in issues related to your long-term coping and survivorship. I think when you think about looking towards the future, we are all advocating, right, for a comprehensive, holistic approach that treats young adults with GYN and ovarian cancers very, very comprehensively with a real attunement to the kind of emotional and social support you need so that you can continue to grow and thrive into older adulthood with really the supports, the friendships, the experiences that are very much consistent with how you develop through the young adulthood years. There's much more psychosocial research targeted to this age group, to these age groups that's needed. And I think it's really, really important to keep the conversation going. So I'm hoping that this has allowed you to think of some things maybe that you have not thought of. And when you think about that, right, like I think that there is an existential component to all of this. And when you look at these questions, I think that, it would be helpful to think through these dimensions and share with us some of the answers to these questions. But I think when you're thinking about yourself, it's really helpful to frame your own experience really in the wisdom that you've gained, in the advice that you now have to offer, to think about the dimensions of yourself that you have discovered along the way, right? And I think that what's the world neglected to ask you about? What do you go to sleep thinking about at night? And so, very much like, what are you helpful for? How can professionals enable you to be and to have the best quality of life that you could have during these very important young adult years? It's interesting to think about who's concerned about your mental health. What do you need the most? How has cancer changed your life? Think about these questions, and we always are welcome and welcome you sharing information with us about these issues. You'll see as you when this talk is available, there are a host of references that might be helpful as you cope with this illness. I think that there's much more to talk about as it relates to all the people in your life, and that whether it is, again, during these years where children play a very dominant role, and we have had some special meetings related to issues related to children, and I think always reach out to us and to the psychosocial support team as you need help with different issues that you face. But you think about some ways in which our goal would be to help you to live your life, to make the choices that work for you, to learn new things in spite of cancer or because of cancer. And always in these years of life, in particular, where you're making memories and creating joy, to like seek and to find joy. And then in my conversation with the 25-year ovarian cancer survivor, like her wisdom was to say, to see cancer as a chapter, but not the whole book. And I think that that's one of the things that we would like to share with you at the end, that although there's a lot going on, this is only part of your life. It is not all of your life. And if we remember the work of Suleika Jawad from last year, the message of be present wherever you are now. And so that's how I would like to leave you from this talk today, to think about being present wherever you are. Thank you for listening, and please reach out for help if we can be helpful. As you see this, just know that this is a host of fingerprints thinking about the ways in which each of our individual selves can become part of a collective that really can be quite beautiful, quite supportive. Thank you.